sometimes it's the exploration and the people that you meet that is the best part of the journey on your adventure. Well, hello there, I'm Tatiana Volk, the GM Witch, and today we're going to be doing a flip through of the Possum Creek's game, Wanderhome by J Dragon. This is a cozy, whimsical, woodland creature themed RPG that focuses on exploration and relationships. Now, I may have a thing for games where you get to play as animals, which I think is very amusing since I have yet to play any, but I just hoard them like a squirrel hoarding nuts in preparation for winter. I don't know what it is. This pastoral fantasy tabletop role-playing game is a rules-light, low-stakes adventure for those of us who want something a lot less stabby. Okay, so as you can see, there is some gorgeous art and some beautiful gold foiling on the actual cover of the book. As I mentioned earlier, it is created by J Dragon and produced by Possum Creek Games. We have the table of contents here and an art guide so that you can tell who worked on what on which pages. Then we go into the journey and we have our first gorgeous double page spread. I have to admit, love the art in this one for sure. We do then go into the introduction and the lay of the land, which it says is a beautiful and boundless land full of life and soul, and obviously a land of animal folk. It goes on to say that it is full of buggy, livestock, pets, and wild creatures, and it boasts a widespread culture of hospitality. So you aren't going to have to worry about where you're going to sleep. You will always be able to find some sort of lodging, and you'll always be given food and water of some sort. But there are still consequences if you decide to be horrible, which I think is a good thing to mention. It also just mentions that the people here are fundamentally good, and although the world was recently caught in a war, it no longer is, and there is no violence in this world anymore. I do always find it interesting, the idea of playing tabletop role-playing games that are not focused on heroic acts which revolve around violence, death, and murder. I feel like I always associate most games with that sort of theme, so it is nice to have these different options if you want to explore something outside of the norm. On the left side here, we have these kind of interjections with talks about different experiences, and then also later on gives specific examples of the text that we get in the actual book. We then get here to the journeying tools. These are important gameplay tools that give you an idea on how the game is run, which I also think is really nice because it does build in some safety tools right into the fundamental basics of the game. So the idea of allowing characters to change or mold things if things make them uncomfortable or are going in a direction, like this is a very collaborative game. And so you'll have situations where it says, this isn't a conversation ender. There are important ways to continue the conversation healthy. Let's do this instead and provide an alternate path through the situation. Do we want to do that? Where are we going to go next? Or what do you think? Things like hold on and even know if something is very harmful to a character or someone is trying to make you do choices that you're not interested in. And then of course the idea that if the game itself is not working, you can always walk away, and that there are other safety tools that you can use as an option. Obviously a lot of this stuff is dependent on the people that you are playing with, and some things will work and other things won't, so it's always a good idea to just have conversations with your group. Then we get a overview of the first few steps and questions to ask if you are planning on doing the game. You can easily do one-shots and or full-on campaigns, and it gives you ideas on how to do that. How long are we expecting this journey to last? If there are any expectations at all, do you want it to be more pastoral or upbeat journey, or do you want it to be a world that lingers more heavily on trauma and recovery? So there are just different game styles that you can play. This definitely seems like a very therapeutic game, which is just a different way of exploring different topics and ideas, and they even call out the idea of healing and exploring trauma and things like that. So I think that is very interesting, and I'm interested in seeing how that aspect would play out in a game. Then we get our first notes on playbooks, which is usual. I appreciate that it lets you know where the playbooks actually start, since we're not going to go into that completely here. One major mechanic of the game are tokens, and this section talks through what tokens are, how you can get tokens, and how you can use them. It also talks a little bit about the idea of failure, which is not a main focus of the game. Again, this seems to be another element that makes this feel like a very therapeutic game for people who don't want to focus on that, or for those who do, because as it states here, you can choose to fail whenever you'd like. Again, this is a very cozy, chill, calm game, and so a lot of the elements that we are used to in other RPGs aren't a big focus in this one, because it's just not the main focus of this game as a whole. Next up, we have some more example conversations, and then we go into another big element, which is the relationships in this game. Kith and kin are fundamental parts of the gameplay. As you're introduced to new characters, some information that you should write down about them on a separate card. And it seems like cards are a big part of the gameplay, as later on we will see that you are able to play different characters or kits from different locations, along with some of the location traits, which are all card-based so that you can pass them around to the other players. Again, it's very collaborative. The next page goes into building your first place, because you start every journey by arriving in a new place. And these are some of the tools that you can use to create those. So you can either pick or choose randomly from these natures, which you get more information about them later on in the book on page 131, which actually is a little bit misleading, because 131 is actually the end of the previous section, and it's really 132 that they expect you to start on, but there are no page numbers, which is one of my gripes about the layout. When I originally went to search for page 131, I just ended up in a whole section of numberless pages, which made it really frustrating to try and find what I was looking for. And then when I did find the page, I realized that it obviously wasn't what they intended, as this is page 131. And this is the beginning of the nature section. Going back here, it does seem pretty straightforward in how you're supposed to set things up. You are also supposed to write down the natures that you choose on a card, similar to the way that you do characters or kit on the previous page. Going back to the nature trait section, here are some examples of the different nature traits that you can get. You've got fields, glens, hollows, hullocks, lakes, ports, and so on. Each one has a little information on what it is, what this type of place can always do, and some options that you can use to customize for your specific game. Moving on from our first place, there's some additional information and then a section on what to do next after you have created your location, and some questions that you should ask every time you meet up right before playing. Questions like, what sort of place did we just travel from? Do we feel our journey has been long? Is there somewhere we hope to go? And then to yourself, you ask, where is your home? And so this is something that you do for each session. And these are some examples of what that would look like. Okay, so now we get into gameplay and how certain things work. So giving the world a voice. This is another reminder of the collaborative aspect of the game. We are all responsible for giving a voice to the world we travel through in one form or another. It mentions that anyone can pick up a current place's nature or kith card to start acting on their behalf. You can also put them down or hand them off at any time, and over the course of a journey, many people might end up giving a voice to a single nature or kith. It does mention a little bit later that you can do this with a GM style of play, where one person is dedicated to owning the voices of the different natures and kiths that you interact with at a single location, but it doesn't seem to be the intended way of play. They mostly just say that in instances where a lot of the players are new and the person who is encouraging or knows the most about the game can be a GM to introduce people into the gameplay, and at any moment in time they can switch over to allowing the players themselves to also be responsible for the different NPCs or characters or kiths in the game. Here it talks about about the importance of the playbooks, and then also gives you an idea of the different problems and the different forms that they can come in within this game. Even though this is a place without violence, it does remind us that nowhere is without problems. You may not know what those problems are when you first arrive, but they're still there under the surface. An interesting take here, though, is that it also states that you are never going to solve a place's problems. You are travelers from beyond. As welcome as you are, this is not your home, and the locals know far more than you do about how to resolve their struggles and worries. The best you can do is ease pain, tackle short-term challenges, and give someone tools that might someday help out. Be ready and prepared to leave somewhere without resolving any of that place's problems. Okay, I have to admit that I think is a really interesting take, and I feel like having a game where you as a player can't solve everything and that being okay is really nice, because sometimes in games where you're expected to be the savior, that can be really discouraging in real life where things just don't work like that. And so I do definitely appreciate this. Going again into details about voicing the NPCs or the kiths of the world and expanding upon that, it's very similar to voicing your own character. It does also here talk about the different styles of play. We've got another example here going into what voicing the places means and what guides are, as I mentioned earlier. So this gives you an idea of what using a GM allows you to do, along with the benefits of not using a GM, or in this case, what they like to call a guide. Then we have some tips on settling in for the night. Trying to journey continuously will exhaust you. Beyond taking breaks while you're all together, it's also important to find natural spots to wrap up for the day. This talks about whether or not it's a situation where you'll be returning for a larger campaign, or if it's a one-shot sort of situation. But it does encourage you to try and find some sort of resolution when you do come to this break. Some examples would be things like stopping and looking at the sunset, or giving one final epilogue for how everything resolves. Once you've wrapped up, you can all take a moment to check in, give yourselves a moment to shift the conversation from the journey itself back to the real world. I think that's a nice take to kind of give you hey, whether or not you're doing a solo play or you're just doing a break until you guys get back together for the big campaign, this is a healthy way of ending these particular sessions. Cute. I like it. I like it. It's so charming. Then over here we have our quick start guide and continuing the journey in instances where this isn't just a one and done, one shot sort of situation. The quick start itself is pretty basic, and I will admit a little bit frustrating, as it doesn't indicate what pages to find specific information on, nor does it actually include all of the information that you need for this. For instance, read the opening paragraphs and cover the tools we have available to us, or start chatting about the journey questions. Where are those located? Obviously, you can flip back and find them. I feel like as a quick start guide, it would be helpful to actually include the page numbers of where you can find those specifically, instead of forcing people to search for them on their own. Now we get into the section that talks about continuing the journey if you want to do more of a campaign style, and introducing some additional elements that you may not experience in a single session. They have a couple of additional natures that you can introduce sparingly in a larger game. Also, it talks about if you would like to go on to different adventures using the same characters, or using elements that you've created in different journeys. So I think that is a fun reminder that just because one game ends doesn't mean that your character can't be used again, or elements of that game cannot be revisited in a different game. Then we get to my new favorite thing of RPGs in general, is the inclusion of solo play. So this game apparently is assumed for 5 or 6 travelers, but can be played with as few as 1 or significantly larger groups. And this gives you some information on what those would look like. And then a element that in a solo play will probably not be touched upon very much is the great arc of the year. As in Wanderhome, there are 5 seasons, each with their own holiday festival announcing the end of that particular season. There is also advancement options as you go through seasons. So each season lasts 2 months and allows your characters basically to grow. Here we have a double page spread that talks about the 5 seasons and gives you a image of the arc of the year, which is a fun visual depiction of what that looks like. Then we get information on what entering a new month looks like and what holidays, growth, and goodbyes look like within the game. And finally, we reach the playbooks. Overview of all of the playbook options, and then the different playbooks themselves, along with character art for each playbook. Each playbook is themed in a unique and fun way, giving you a little bit information on that kind of character type, some animal choices that best fit with that character type, traits to choose from, some options that can describe your look, and then thematic sections that you can choose from that fit in with your character type. And in this case, you have a special firefly companion that stays with you, and for your choices here, it is figuring out how you met this companion of yours. Since light seems to be an important theme for this character, you have options to choose a light that you still keep lit and one that has died out long ago, which you will then tell your table about. Questions to ask the characters around you to help make connections that are based off of your character type. Things that your character type can always do, and then these are the advancements. Each playbook has a collection of different things that you can choose from, but the specifics of each one changes based off of the different playbook types. Here's another example. This one is with Fool. You have options to choose things that are true about you and things that people assume, things that you carry with you and that you're pretty sure is somewhere around but not sure where, questions to ask, things that you can always do, and then what you can get when you advance. There are quite a lot of characters here for you to choose from, and then after that we get into the trait section. More gorgeous art, an overview of these traits, and then a breakdown of each one. I don't see anything in the player section about the traits, so I do think that these are specifically for the Kith or NPCs of the world. There are artistic traits, which include things like crafty, poetic, glamorous, grounded traits, honest, quiet, wise, and so on. Intellectual, personal, physical, social, and then there are some traumatized traits, which has its own section here. Things like being cautious, grieving, hurt, frantic, furious, lost, heroic, dead. Interesting. Dead Kith was once alive but isn't anymore. They are often spectral lights, wandering souls, and the last remnants of a forgotten time, among others. And I should mention that even though there are some magical and whimsical elements in the game, that there is a note that if you would like, you can completely ignore those elements if you want it to be a more realistic depiction of the world or a little less magical, which is also amusing because, you know, you're animals. But it just gives another layer of flexibility in how you can approach the game, which I adore. And then next up we have the natures or the location traits. More beautiful art, an overview of all of the nature options, and then we jump into the different types of natures. So we have the comfortable nature traits, which is like a farm or a garden, a market or a monastery. And so these, similar to the NPCs or Kith, you would write down this information on a card. So say there's a market, you would write down the things that this place can always do, and then write down the 2 aesthetic elements that you've chosen and the 1 folklore element about this location. It does seem like a lot of these locations have the similar questions with different themes that are thematic to their specific locations. Tower, workshop, then we have verdant natures, fields, glens, hollows, so on and so forth, swamps and lagoons. More absolutely gorgeous artwork. This is for the liminal natures, lakes, ports, roads, taverns, and our sprawling natures, carnivals, castles, furnace, metropolis, palace, universities, and things like caves, mirages, moors, wilderness, deserts, labyrinths, ruins, and so on. All right, and then we get to the last section, which is about the season, months, and holidays. As mentioned earlier, there are 5 seasons, and this gets broken up into those 5 seasons. So you have Leap, Bright, Breathe, Silt, and Chill. There is a little title page for the season of Leap, and it talks about the different months in that particular season. So Till Soil, they mentioned that typically this is where you start when playing. So if you didn't figure out or pay attention in your first session and you decided you wanted to do a campaign, you would assume that you had started here and move on from there. Monsoon, and then the Sun Parade, because each season ends with a parade and that's how you advance. Then there's a couple of alternate holidays and how those functions, and then we go into the next season. This one has the month of Bloom Meadow and Devil Days. They talk about different elements during these months, and then the Day of the Song and alternate holidays. And that is basically the game. Pretty straightforward, very cute and simple, and just very, very cozy and charming. I really enjoyed this. This is definitely another possible option to do a solo game series with, so if you are interested in that, let me know down below. After I complete the current one that I'm working on, I will probably put up a poll to see which games that I have recently reviewed that you are interested in me testing out for the next solo game. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to see more videos, you can check those out here and here. If you've made it this far, include a backpack emoji. Is there a backpack emoji? Something that makes you think of a cozy journey. Include that down below, and I will catch you in the next video. Until next time.